Hello friends, it's Nancy from Astrology and Angel Mediums today with a weekly check-in for the week of August 31st, so Sunday, August 31st through September 6th, which would be next Saturday. So I hope everyone's doing well and taking care of themselves. I decided to finally upgrade my microphone because I got kind of tired of it, my other one, not being very consistent. So let's hope that the sound and the quality of the sound is a little bit better, so I'm not having to try to edit things so much after I film these. So, well, I guess we'll just put that one there because I wanted to pop out. So let's focus on what we need to know as the collective this week. So we have the Fool reversed. All right, what do we need to do as a collective this week? We have the Wise One, or it's the Hierophant in traditional tarot. We'll kind of put this little guy over here because I wanted to come out before everybody. And then let's see what we need to release as a collective. We have the Six of Cups. And then finally, what do we need to contemplate as a collective? We have Death. All right. Hopefully everything looks good in frame. I'm just going to kind of move them a little bit just so you can see the entirety of the cards. All right, so let's talk about the collective energy for this week of the end of August, the very last day of August, all the way through the beginning of September. And let me just say that I feel like this year is flying by. I feel like it's going by very quickly, which I don't know if anyone else feels like that. I've also been extremely busy, so I'm sure that also is a contributing factor for me personally. So since the very first card that kind of popped out, it flew out of the deck, I feel like maybe this is something we need to keep in mind, and maybe this will be an influencing factor with the energy of this week. And I think it's interesting that we have 4 major cards here out of 5 cards that I've pulled. So the Wheel of Fortune is one of these cards that can be seen as one that talks about things shifting. It's really a card about cycles. It talks about the transition from one state to another. Some people like to look at it as an opportunity for your luck to change. So if things haven't really been going your way, if you feel like things haven't really been moving in the direction of what you want, the Wheel of Fortune is typically a card that is seen as a positive influence in allowing you to surrender to the next situation that will be made available to you. Now, when I think of the Wheel of Fortune, especially as a card that's just like a jumper, which just means a card that's kind of popped out of the deck while I'm shuffling, I feel like sometimes this can be a message that we all need to be a little bit more aware of, a little bit more tuned into, maybe a little bit receptive to what is trying to shift, what is trying to change in our lives. So if you kind of feel like things haven't been essentially like moving in the direction of what you want, or maybe you've had a tough time kind of navigating into something that feels a little bit more solid or stable or familiar to you in some ways, I think the Wheel of Fortune is here as a reminder that there is something coming on the horizon that will allow this next cycle to really commence. But when we think of cycles, very much like the Death card, we have to be able to release and let go of whatever is no longer in alignment with what we really truly need. The Wheel of Fortune is also a card where a lot of people focus on the fortune aspect, right? We talk about, when we think of fortune, we think of financial abundance, of good things happening, lady luck kind of making an appearance. So maybe be a little bit aware of what aspect in your life is trying to shift. Where do you feel something growing and changing and allowing you to kind of step into something a little bit different, something that maybe feels a little bit more in alignment with the beneficial or, kind of like abundant aspects of your life. Because I do feel that this card can bring the opportunity for us to kind of walk into this if we are mentally and emotionally prepared to kind of move into the next thing. So some good things to kind of keep in mind for this week is that maybe something unexpected or maybe even anticipated will finally kind of fall into place, allowing a lot of us to kind of have that sigh of relief, that sense of, okay, finally things are shifting in a direction that makes a little bit more sense for me personally. All right, so with what do we need to know, we have the Fool reversed. Now, the Fool is one of these cards that I like to look at as one of, this positive expectancy, I guess would be like the nicest way of putting it. It's this energy that's kind of saying like, we're just going to kind of get out there and trust and know that, having a sense of faith that things are going to work out or that we're going to be exactly where we need to be. But there is this inexperience. There is this sense of, maybe we don't always know everything and see how everything is going to pan out and fall into place. So I think with the Fool reverse, with what we need to know is that maybe we've been a little bit hesitant to kind of trust. Maybe we've been a little bit hesitant to kind of step into a new beginning. And so maybe we have been holding ourselves back. So it makes it a little bit more challenging for energy that is trying to come in, like the Wheel of Fortune, to really take root, to really come in and allow us to kind of see the next phase. So when I think of the Fool, I think it's very much this energy that's kind of saying like, hey, there is something here that we've been hanging on to. We have had some fear. We've had some maybe lack of action, lack of momentum in some way. And so there is something that's kind of like not really shifting how we need it to. So I think that this week, what we need to know is that if it feels like something is trying to welcome us into the next phase, or there is an invitation from the universe or from our situation or our circumstances to maybe take a risk and to kind of go into something without really having all of the information or knowing everything about the situation, I think the Fool reverse is kind of saying like, maybe we need to not be so focused on what we don't know or what it's going to look like, or having everything kind of shelled out and planned out and making 100% sense for a lot of us, because I think some of us kind of get caught up in like the details and this and that, the other. And the thing with the Fool is that it's not about the details. It's very much about, I'm just going to kind of get out there and I'll deal with it whenever I come across it, or I will, figure it out as I'm there. But I'm not going to stress and worry about it until I get there, right? I'm not going, because I don't know that it exists. I don't really know what's out there. And so I think the Fool reverse this week is kind of saying like, hey, there's a lot of stuff that we don't know, and that's okay. We don't have to know everything. We don't have to be so prepared for the next thing that we have to have a whole plan and strategy and, have everything mapped out and have everything, basically shelled out into a way that would like, we are like, oh, I finally have a deeper understanding about what's happening with this energy. So I think the Fool reverse is kind of warning us that we're getting too stuck on the specifics, or we're getting too stuck on certain elements or aspects of our lives that, we're like, oh, it should be like this, it should look like that, it, will feel like this, it will feel like that. And we're not actually taking any positive steps forward. So it makes it a little bit more challenging for us to kind of do what we need to do in a lot of ways. Now, moving right along to what we need to do when we're talking about what we need to do, we have the Wise One, or the Hierophant, in a traditional tarot deck. So when I think of the Hierophant and what we need to do, is that it very much is a card of learning and teaching. It is about, really understanding ourselves in some different ways, because this is a card that to me really represents like traditions. It represents like structures. It represents governing agencies. It represents like things that are a little bit more rigid. And with what we need to do is that maybe it's saying, hey, we need to maybe take a look at these things within ourselves. We need to kind of step back into understanding what we've learned and what still do we have to, what wisdom do we have to impart from that? What else do we still have to learn in order for us to kind of really, what's the word I want to use here? What we really want to do with this knowledge and these things that we have come to understand. When I think of the Hierophant or the Wise One, and I love how it's described here as the Wise One, because it is very much saying like, hey, there are keys within you that can unlock a lot of doors. And in order to do so, you have to kind of go within so that you can have an understanding of what those doors will open up for you as an individual and within your life. So I think that this is kind of saying like what we need to do here is we need to kind of look at everything that we've learned, look at everything that we have accomplished, look at all of the things that we have been discovering, not just within ourselves, especially because we just finished up with a Mercury retrograde. So I hope that a lot of us have kind of taken a step back and kind of reflected a little bit on, what comes next, what should we do, kind of taking some, not to say steps back, but maybe some steps into ourselves, really trying to understand our own personal motivations, trying to understand like what's going on, what are we trying to do, how will this look whenever we move forward. So I think with this card, especially with what we need to do this week, is that the universe is kind of asking us to take a moment to look within ourselves and see what is it that we have within ourselves that can be applied to the situation, that can be, what is like the little Rolodex. Like, I'm sure some of you guys are probably a little too young to even understand that reference. But a Rolodex was like a little information file, and you would just kind of have it and you could kind of sort through it to kind of get information, whether it was like contact information, business cards, things like that. So if we think of like our mind as having something similar to that of like, okay, last time I was in this situation, or last time I saw this, or, from my understanding, this is how things may go. So I think that this is kind of saying, hey, even if you don't always understand how things are going to work out or see how things are going to be, the Wise One is kind of saying like, hey, we still have a lot of knowledge within ourselves. And what we need to do is kind of have a trust and understanding that even if we don't have the exact knowledge to apply for a particular situation, we have to still be pliable enough to learn what we should do with what we have going on. So I think that these two cards are kind of saying like, hey, stop trying to do everything in a very strategic, very like, this is how it is, this is how it's going to be. I think that these two cards are kind of saying like the strategy here is really just trusting, moving forward, and understanding that as you're going through it, you will learn, but things are trying to shift. And so we have to just kind of go with it. We cannot control how things are going to shift or in what direction they may shift, but we can control how we react to the things that are changing. So I think that's why we are moving on to what we need to release, which is the Six of Cups. So what we need to release this week is going to be the Six of Cups. Now, this is a card that really talks about nostalgia, childhood memories. It can talk about, this sort of energy of like looking back and, maybe some emotional baggage. But I feel like there's an invitation for a lot of healing in the energy of this card. Now, with this being what we need to release is that maybe we have been hanging on to an idea of what we thought things were going to look like. And I know, as someone in their fourth decade of life, I can tell you that there are many things that I've had to, how can I say it? a lot of things in my life that I've had to just understand aren't going to be the way that I had hoped that they would be when I was a child. And I've had to manage my expectations, so to speak, about how life would look like for me as an adult, or for my family, or anything like that. And I think that's kind of the energy here, because it's almost saying like, hey, this is what we got to release. We got to release this, thing of, well, I thought it was going to be like this, or, we're so focused on how life used to feel and how life used to be. And nostalgia is a beautiful thing, don't get me wrong. But are you getting so caught up in it that you're forgetting to kind of be present, to be present in the things that are trying to change, that you're not allowing yourself to kind of say, yeah, that's how I used to do things, but I have to do things a little bit differently because life isn't how it used to be. So I think the Six of Cups, especially at this time, for what we need to release this week, is that maybe there are some things within our lives that we've had to come to an understanding of, hey, it's not really going to look like that moving forward, and that is okay. But maybe we need to kind of take a moment to kind of sit with that child self and, kind of heal it a little bit, kind of like she's doing here with the card, where she's kind of like, it's okay to take a moment and say, I see you. I know that we thought this is how things were going to be, but things are a little bit different, and that's okay. There's still going to be really lovely and wonderful, because there's so many other things and a lot more potential here that maybe we just haven't really been seeing, because we're so focused on, well, I thought it was going to be like a little checklist of me, saying I have this, and it's going to be like this, and I'm going to be doing this, and it's going to, blah, 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 blah. And we have, I don't know about you guys, but I know for me, I've had a lot of harsh lessons that have taught me to not be so hard pressed on my life needs to look a particular way by a particular time. So I think that this week is kind of saying like, we got to let some stuff go. We got to let go of some things that say it has to be this way, and it has to be this rigid. It has to look and feel this way in order for me to feel like I am on the right path, or I am doing the right things. So I think it's more of like coming to an understanding that there is a time and place for us to have a little bit of that sense of nostalgia and that sense of those childhood memories in some way, of like looking back and kind of saying like, oh, I really wish like blah, 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 X, Y, and Z, whatever we want to fit in here. But I think that this card is kind of saying like, sit with it for a second, but let it go. Don't let it be something that has you so rigid and so intuitively off from like what is happening in your life now, that you're not enjoying what is happening, that you're not present in what is trying to kind of be here for you at this time, especially when we have these other major cards that are kind of saying like, there's some big changes happening, but I need you to kind of like look within and kind of sit with like the things that maybe aren't going to be exactly how you thought they were going to, and like let that shit go, because it's time for us to move in a different direction. All right, and finally, with what we need to contemplate, we have the Death card, or Rebirth, which I do love how in this deck there is that that inference, I guess, of there is an opportunity here for something to shift, for something to change, for something to be different. So the Death card, I know, is one of these cards that tends to kind of scare a lot of people away, or make them have a sense of a lot of fear. And death is one of these things that we look at with a lot of finality. We think of like the physical death that all of us will experience as long as we're living. And I think the thing with this is that it's more about the metaphorical death, the part that maybe we don't always realize, how many chapters we close, how many endings we go through our personal lives as we kind of continue living, how many things we have to kind of say this ends so that something else can begin. I mean, even if we look back at something as simple as like the chapters in school, each grade that we go through, that is a death in and of itself at the end of the school year, and then we start fresh. So I think that this card, with it being what we need to contemplate, is that it's kind of inviting us to say, where are there some chapters or some things some situations, relationships, circumstances in our lives that are ready to kind of be closed, and for us to really have the opportunity to walk through into rebirth, to have an opportunity to kind of say, like, this is my metamorphosis, this is my transformation. I don't have to kind of sit where I've been. So I think that this is an invitation to kind of say, like, what in our lives has been trying to change, but maybe we've been holding back because we have, I don't know, some hesitation to kind of step into the next thing, because it is scary to have this sense of, let me move into something new, let me do something else, let me change what I've been doing, especially when we feel like we've been in the direction of, you know, what we've been working towards, and within our knowledge of, like, this is what I've been doing this whole time. The death and rebirth card is here to kind of say, we got to think about, you know, what are we holding on to in our lives that maybe no longer fits for the sort of life that we're trying to step into, or the life that, you know, is trying to kind of take root where we are. So I think that this week we may be met with some challenges as far as, like, what is no longer viable. Maybe there's an opportunity for us to kind of shift and change our ideologies, our expectations, to kind of say, all right, this is what really makes sense for me moving forward. And I think that's why we have this as our contemplation card, because it's kind of saying, like, hey, there's something in our lives that maybe we've been hanging on to, and it doesn't really make sense for us anymore. So there's something that needs to shift, whether that is a perspective, whether that's a situation, because with the major cards, they don't just focus on one area of our lives, while the suits or the minor cards, you know, like the cups, can just really focus on connections, relationships, our intuition, creativity, our feelings. These other cards, the majors, they really talk about all aspects. They kind of encompass all of the different elements of our lives. And so it feels like this week is going to be a big one in a lot of ways as a collective, because there's something that is trying to fundamentally change. And I think that this is a very apt message for, because we're now in eclipse season. So we have this opportunity to kind of say, like, hey, there's some stuff that is trying to shift. There's something that needs to change, and we need to stop avoiding it. We need to stop holding back, because the things that are trying to shift, we're ready for them. And I think the Wheel of Fortune kind of popping out beforehand is kind of saying, like, we're ready for it. But there's some baggage that we're kind of carrying along. And I'm not saying that new beginnings or new chapters or stepping into something unfamiliar is going to be easy. It's scary. I understand. I have a lot of Taurus placements. I am very much I am comfortable where I'm at, and I can struggle a little bit with shifts and changes. But I think that these cards are kind of saying, hey, this week we really need to take into account what is trying to change, what is trying to shift, and why are we holding ourselves back from really stepping into this next thing that is trying to kind of, you know, be here for us. So thank you so much for joining me. I really hope that you enjoyed this reading, and I appreciate you guys watching any of my other videos. As always, please take care, stay safe, and make good choices out there. Bye.